Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. Today, we're fortunate to have with us two really great guests. We've got with us Chris Grandpre, who's the CEO and founder of Outdoor Living Brands, and also Martin Edlund, who is the CEO of Malaria No More. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, the pleasure and privilege is all ours, and we thank you for taking the time to be here with us today for this discussion. I think it would be wise for us to start by asking Chris just to explain a little bit of the history of the partnership between Outdoor Living Brands and Malaria No More.
Sure. Be happy to, Devin. One of our businesses within Outdoor Living Brands is a business called Mosquito Squad. And Mosquito Squad helps our clients by protecting their yards and their properties and keeping them pest and disease free, principally from mosquitoes and ticks. And here in the United States, and we have roughly 200 locations, mosquitoes are largely more of an annoyance, and from a lifestyle perspective, people like to spend time outside and not be chased inside by mosquitoes. And we were looking for a way to elevate the purpose of the business, and a partnership with Malaria No More, and as I'm sure Martin will share with us, Malaria No More is focused on eradicating needless deaths from malaria around the world. And we're so fortunate they've been largely eradicated here in the United States that we wanted to partner up with Malaria No More to, again, as I said, elevate the purpose of our business and our brand.
Martin, how is the partnership working for you?
Thanks, Devin. It's fantastic for us, and I think Chris has done something really smart here with his business, which is to find a way to connect it to a social cause that really fits the core of the business, the core competencies, and kind of really speaks to their consumers. You know, it's a little known fact that the mosquito is actually the deadliest creature on the planet to human beings. So we think a lot about great white sharks and snakes and spiders and other things, but the mosquito is actually far and away the deadliest creature on the planet due to diseases like malaria, which is the biggest killer, vector-borne killer, but a handful of other diseases as well. And so, you know, I think what Chris and the Mosquito Squad have done is to recognize that fact and make it a really central part of how they motivate their franchisees and how they engage their customers. And we're incredibly grateful for the partnership.
Well, it is, I think, an exciting thing to contemplate, the potential synergy with the obvious connection between the mosquito abatement business and the mosquito abatement business that you're both in, different though they may be. So, Chris, you had outlined for us, I think, an interesting way to think about our discussion today, which was to provide 3 tips for social entrepreneurs and others that might be interested in creating a partnership like this. Your first tip was to select a cause that fits your business. Would you just take a minute and tell us a little bit about what you were thinking?
Sure, and I think we've talked about this here just in the last minute. Clearly, the mission and purpose of Malaria No More to eradicate malaria around the world is a great fit for a business that happens to be in the mosquito abatement business. And I think for us, when you align your business with a cause that fits with your business model and the purpose of your business, it's easier to get engagement and buy-in at all levels, whether that's through our corporate team at Outdoor Living Brands and Mosquito Squad, whether that's through our franchise system of our 200-plus Mosquito Squad franchisees, or whether ultimately that's all the way down to our retail customers. When there's an alignment between the cause and the purpose of the business, I think people get it, and you're more likely to get that emotional connection to that cause.
From your perspective, Martin, do you see this as being an important principle for someone who's looking to incorporate some cause into their business?
I really do, and you know, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and great progress in those 10 years, about a 71% reduction in child deaths from malaria. And the private sector is really kind of in our DNA. We were founded by two private sector leaders, and we've worked with a variety of partners over the last decade. And the partnerships that really stick are those where you have that strong alignment between kind of purpose in a business and purpose and mission in a cause. You couldn't get more obvious or literal than the one that we have with Mosquito Squad. But I think about other partners, Kimberly-Clark, for instance, who makes Huggies. They're really expanding their business into Africa and trying to reach new mothers and kids. And it turns out from their research, they actually use diapers principally at night to manage bedwetting and soiling at night. And of course, night is when you're at risk of being bitten by the mosquito, the Anopheles, that carries malaria. And so at the same moment that you're doing kind of what's best for baby and caring for your child, it's the same moment that you want to be putting that bed net over their head and remind mothers to do that. So it's another great example of that synergy. And when you find that alignment, you find partnerships like we have with Mosquito Squad that really flourish, and you find all sorts of new and interesting directions they can go. I had the chance to travel with Chris and some members of his team last year to Kenya and see the work firsthand. And the ideas and the resonance and the energy that comes from that alignment is just so powerful to witness.
It's interesting, Martin, that you highlight the Kimberly-Clark example, because it highlights the potential for something to be very strategic, even if it's not obvious. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have connected bed nets and diapers, but the connection is clear, and that's an exciting and strategic way to be thinking about Chris's point. Now, Chris, your next point was that we should select a cause that you're passionate about. Why do you think that's important?
Well, I think people make business decisions based on underlying human motivations, and we happen to be a franchisor of 4 different businesses, and our franchisees invest in a business as a vehicle to achieve personal goals, career goals, lifestyle goals, wealth and income goals. And it's not really necessarily the business itself. The business is a vehicle to achieve certain things in their life. And I think a social cause as well, for it to be successful and really take root within an organization and in a culture, it needs to be something that people can be passionate about. And as Malaria No More has worked tirelessly over the last 10 years to eradicate malaria, the statistics show that those affected with malaria are largely young children. And if you can't get passionate about saving the life of a child before that child has had the ability to go out and make their mark on the world, what else can you get passionate about? And so I think passion is, again, linked to creating the engagement across the entire enterprise.
Great. Now, Martin, you've had an opportunity to work with companies that are engaged, companies that aren't really passionate. Can you tell the difference? Does it matter to you?
Absolutely. And I think Chris's point is a really good one. You need that kind of business alignment, that connection that feels authentic, but then you also need that human connection and that resonance. And that's true for nonprofit organizations and mission-driven organizations as well. The thing that keeps me so motivated around this cause is when we look back on this period of time, we're going to be remembered as the generation that ended preventable maternal and child deaths. And in our view, no death is more preventable, more senseless than a child dying from a mosquito bite. I had the chance to live and work in West Africa. I was living in Senegal when my wife was pregnant, and we were sleeping under our mosquito nets with the power out, and had the very real concern that a mosquito bite might end our pregnancy and threaten our unborn child. So I felt that for a brief period of time, the reality that people, that mothers and parents feel around the globe, and inspiring people, getting them kind of jazzed up by this is so important. And you can really tell the difference between people who are kind of going through the motions and people who are really passionate and get it. And Chris and his team and their franchisees are certainly in the passion camp. So you couldn't be more delighted to be working with them. And it's the kind of example we point to when we talk to other prospective partners about kind of what it can do for their business and do for their kind of motivation.
Now, Chris, you talk about the importance of leadership from the top on a corporate social responsibility program. Tell us a little bit about why you think that's so important.
Sure. Well, I think, if you get the right cause, you've selected the right cause that aligns with your business, and if it's one that you're personally passionate about, I think the third point really naturally follows, that if the leadership of the organization is directly involved in that effort, and it's not something that's delegated down to others in the organization, to your marketing, that if the leadership is directly involved, then the rest of the organization, from, in our case, direct employees, franchisees, hopefully our customers, are going to see firsthand how important this is to us. So I think it's a leading by example type of situation, and I think as Martin shared a few minutes ago, we had the opportunity to travel together in Kenya recently and see firsthand not only the level of the problem and the challenges in an underdeveloped country and underdeveloped parts of rural Kenya, but also to see firsthand the impact that Malaria No More and Mosquito Squad's relationship with Malaria No More is making. And so this year we're planning a trip later this year to go into Cameroon and do similar things. And so I think leading from the top in terms of a social cause is a way to set the tone and really the direction of the program for the entire enterprise.
Great point. Now, Martin, I want to just shift gears with you a little bit. You've talked about the great progress that the world is making, largely under your leadership, against malaria around the world, but still we're talking about 500,000 deaths a year, millions of cases of malaria every year. What are the challenges that remain, and how are we possibly going to eradicate malaria?
That's the million or billion dollar question, Devin. It's worth putting this disease in perspective and realizing that when we talk about malaria, it may be kind of an unfamiliar word to us here in America. We eliminated in the early 1950s, so we haven't had these struggles. But malaria is one of the oldest, deadliest diseases known to man. It's literally been with us for millennia. There are actually stories that came out this past week that malaria may have contributed to the decline of the dinosaurs. So this is something that's been kind of with us from the get-go. And for most of that time, we didn't have the tools to effectively combat this disease. We were just resigned to the fact that a few million people were going to be dying every year from mosquito bites. That really changed in about a decade ago, when led really by the U.S. and African leadership, people stood up and said, you know what, we do have effective tools, and our founders saw this really as a business problem. How do we mobilize the money? How do we figure out the supply chains, get the data to run this business effectively? And what we've seen in the last decade is a total transformation of this issue. We've gone from about 1 million kids and pregnant moms dying every year to about 450,000 people dying a year, which is still way too many. But over a 60% decline in global deaths from malaria. And I think for the first time in human history, this has given us the confidence to say, you know what, with all the kind of wondrous technologies and progress we're seeing in the world, we don't need to live in a world where kids are dying from mosquito bites any longer. So late last year, our co-founder, Ray Chambers, and Bill Gates worked together to launch the first business plan to eradicate a disease. And it really lays out kind of step by step, year by year, how we get that done using new strategies, new technologies, and a new approach to financing. And we think it can really be an eradication model for the 21st century. It's going to take continued commitment. This ultimately comes down to people kind of sticking with it. It's going to take resources. It's going to take leadership from endemic countries, and it's going to take a commitment to innovate and problem solve as we go. And that's really one of the things that sets this apart. This isn't polio or another disease where we have a single solution and it's just scale that solution. This is really adaptive management and problem solving as we go. And it's a challenge, but it's a really exciting proposition and one that could truly change the course of human history. So we're committed to getting it done.
Now, polio was nearly as widespread, perhaps more so really 30 years ago than malaria is today. Are you able to draw any lessons from that, despite the distinctions between the diseases?
Certainly, certainly. We've learned a lot from the smallpox effort, which is the first and only successful eradication effort of a human disease to date. Polio is, as they keep saying, this close, down to a couple of countries and really a few dozens of cases. And one of the things that they've done so successfully is to really harness the power of data and information in this campaign. I mean, you look at the polio campaign, and they know literally household by household, who's been vaccinated and where those gaps are. And that same level of information is really needed here. The word malaria is a misnomer. It's an Italian word that means bad air, because that's how they thought malaria was transmitted. And misinformation is really our biggest enemy, along with mosquitoes, in the malaria fight. And the advances in data are really changing that. In the last 5 years, we've gone from not knowing who even has the disease to knowing in 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer pixels exactly what the percentage of parasite positive people are across the African continent. And using mobile data, we know how people move and therefore how the parasite moves between communities. So we're getting so much smarter and more targeted and more efficient in how we tackle this problem.
That is exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. Well, we have I think some neat opportunities here to pick your brains a little bit from a personal standpoint, and I hope you'll bear with me. But Chris, tell us a little bit of. You've become quite a role model. You've become a real leader in the world, and I'm wondering who you in turn look up to as a role model.
Well, I certainly think in this particular issue, Martin and the entire team at Malaria No More are absolutely role models for us to learn from and learn how we can implement this cause into our business at Mosquito Squad. But on a personal side, it was absolutely my father. I grew up in a household where my dad gave back to the world and the community, and the day he retired, he was on his way home from the office stopping at the different organizations that he was going to volunteer. So it's part of who I am, and I think I look ultimately to my father, but I certainly, in the business side, I look to Martin Edlund and his entire team at Malaria No More.
That's great. Now, Martin, you've really kind of devoted your life and career to this. You were a bona fide journalist in an earlier iteration of your career, and now you've given yourself over to this cause. Why? What motivated you personally? I mean, I get that malaria is bad and someone ought to do this. Why did you think it should be you?
Yeah, Devin, it's a great question, and if you had told me a decade ago that I would spend the next decade working on malaria, first of all, I would have asked you how to spell malaria. This just was not kind of on my radar. I worked in professional politics for a while. I worked as a journalist. I did a couple of startups, but I got to a point where I really stepped back and asked the question: how can I apply my time, energy, talents to do the most good in the world? And that may sound like a simplistic question, and in a lot of ways it is, but it led me to look at the range of things that were happening. I read a book at the time by Dr. Jeffrey Sachs called The End of Poverty that really underscored that we have some big problems like malaria that we actually have pretty tangible solutions to, and we could make a massive difference if we just put our minds to it. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to go actually work for Jeffrey Sachs and Ray Chambers in some work that they were doing, and Malaria No More spun out of that. I will say every couple of years I step back and I ask that same naive question, am I still doing the thing with my time, energy, talents, such as they are, to help the world. And it's been a pretty easy, positive answer to that question as I look back. And I've really never felt more that way than I do right now. I think we're at an inflection point in this fight. I think we can put the world on a path to end this disease, and I'm just incredibly passionate about trying to make that happen in my small way. I would say that for whatever credit individuals deserve, and I would certainly point to Bill Gates and Ray Chambers, people like Chris and his team who've signed on to this. This is about as a society deciding to get this done. There's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's really true in the malaria fight. This is about a whole network of partners signing on and bringing different kind of talents and capacities to this. And that's what it's going to take to end one of the world's oldest, deadliest diseases.
Well, I appreciate that, Martin. Now, Chris, I want to ask you quickly. We're running out of time, but you are the master of good tips. We'd like to ask you for an impact hack, some way that we can do more good in the world. And I realize you've given us 3 good tips already, but if you got one more bonus impact hack for us before you go.
Yeah, I think it would be don't be afraid to start small, meaning sometimes folks are inclined to wait until they have enough time or enough financial resources to embrace and assist on whatever the cause is that's important to them. And I think the way we've tried to structure our program with Malaria No More is that we encourage all of our franchisees to figure out what makes sense from a time or a financial contribution level and relate it to something that's part of the daily business. Maybe it's a contribution per treatment every time we're out in the yard protecting a client's home from mosquitoes. Maybe it's a financial contribution per number of customers that they have. Maybe it's a fixed monthly contribution they can find amenable to their budget. But don't wait until you think it can be something large scale. Implement something small right away. Make it part of your business. Make it part of who you are. Have it take root in the culture of your organization.
Fantastic. Great tip. Don't be afraid to start small. I love it. Now, gentlemen, I want to ask each of you before you go if you'd give me a quick instructions for our audience on how people can get in touch with you. Martin, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at Martin M. Edlund. Last name is Edlund. And you can also follow Malaria No More at Malaria No More. And we'd love to engage with anyone who is inspired by this conversation or Chris's example and wants to be a part of this mission.
Fantastic. And Chris, how do people reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah, Devin, I think the best way for me is via email. It's Grandpre, so CGRANDPRE at outdoorlivingbrands.com.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for taking the time to be with me today, and really and truly wish you both success in your efforts to spare the world from further pain and suffering from malaria.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks for
All righty.
giving
Let's
us
do
the
some good.
platform as well.